we now have with us a professional to do this. So I want to introduce Tim Strabing, who has been doing this for a long time, did it for 3 years at the Naval Academy, and we've asked him to come in and talk to you a little bit about walking through the process, what it would look like to apply for one of these big scholarships that you can apply for in your senior year, and to sort of lead you through the process, see if that's the right thing for you, and to answer any questions that you've got. So, Tim.
Great. Thanks, KDK. Hey, nice to meet all of you. We'll have plenty of time for question and answers if you got questions on things as we go. I just wanted to sort of lay out for you kind of what the opportunity is, kind of what type of work it takes to put together a quality application, which is a process in itself, and then see what other questions are out there and that kind of thing. So there are lots and lots of scholarships out there. This is a subset of scholarships that are designed primarily for seniors, or I think in the case of both of you, maybe after you're done with college to compete for it, the year or the 1 or 2 years just out. So it's a pretty narrow window to apply for it, and it's specific to UK scholarships essentially. So including Ireland, I guess, in there broadly once you see the Mitchell here. And then more broadly with the Fulbright, which KDK is the expert on, and he'll speak on that one as well. So here's the kind of gambit of these scholarships. Rhodes, which you've probably heard of, maybe the Marshall you've heard of, Gates, which is kind of Gates is fairly new. It's been around for about 15 years, but that's like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation founded a Rhodes-like scholarship at Cambridge. So the Rhodes goes to Oxford, Gates goes to Cambridge. The Mitchell Scholarship, which is Ireland and Northern Ireland for 1 year graduate school. Churchill Scholarship, which is at Churchill College in Cambridge, and then the Rotary International, depending on your local Rotary Club. So maybe you're asking yourself, why go overseas? Why go to the UK to study? So I spent 2 years at Oxford. I was a Marshall Scholar when I graduated from the Naval Academy a couple decades ago. And so a few things from my perspective on this. One, it's kind of a unique place to learn. The way that UK schools deliver education is pretty different than the way we do it here in the United States. So like you can kind of see the picture there, but they have a much more tutorial-based system. So essentially they'll give you a stack of books to read for a week. You write a 2,000 to 3,000 word paper, and you sit down and have what's called a tutorial, where you have this preeminent expert on whatever subject matter, and you just sit in their office for an hour or two, drink tea, and they grill you on it, which is, overall, it's a pretty powerful way to learn, because it's not like you can hide in the seat back there, have done half your reading, and sort of skate through class. So and not all the programs are like that. The graduate programs are maybe they've come more towards the United States, but they still incorporate that more smaller setting type of learning happening. So there's a pedagogical difference, I think, getting a graduate education in the UK versus a US experience. Travel probably goes without saying. If you have an interest or a penchant to travel, it's pretty fantastic to be UK based, because there's these awesome European budget airlines for $40. You can go to Rome for the weekend, or sort of name your own adventure around that. It probably goes without saying, in a globalized world, having an education where you're outside the setting of your home country in terms of international collaboration and a global network is just fantastic. So in the UK, because of the nature of kind of the Commonwealth and what the place it holds in the world attracts, and frankly from a policy standpoint, they have, I think, more accommodating visa and immigration stuff for students to come there. Like all of their quality universities, Oxford, Cambridge, London schools, LSE, Edinburgh, have just fantastic international community for graduate work and that kind of thing. So so that's to put the UK on your radar screen as a unique place to do graduate education. This is another slide, I guess, hammering this point home. So maybe you're sitting there like, why don't I go to MIT or Harvard or Michigan or Georgetown, or whatever school you're thinking about here domestically. So UK, if you look at probably global rankings, is right up there within a US school you're going to look at, in terms of the quality UK schools. Again, this gets back to sort of the international component of the education, to have a broadening outside of the experience. I mean, it's a similar sort of idea of, did any of you guys do junior years abroad?
I did for a month. Yeah.
For a month?
Right.
Yeah. Would you have liked to have stayed for 2 years? Yeah. I mean, the value of this, you dip your toe in the water if you go for a month, or you do a semester, or even sometimes they'll do a year abroad, right? You get to do this for 2 or 3 years, and the experience is profoundly different. Interdisciplinary learning is always really a good aspect that comes out of this. And then the last piece, depending on what you're thinking about, a lot of times you can do things more policy related. In the UK, offers good opportunities to be able to do that. So just another thing to keep in mind there. So I think it's worth saying applying for these scholarships is a prodigious amount of work. So I would say for the average, like Rhodes, Marshall, Gates candidate, will put in, depending on how you measure it, but at least a few hundred hours of work on the application. So, and that's over probably an 18-month period. But it will almost feel like it's more than taking, like, if you take this on and apply next fall, it's more work than taking another class. And this is why we're having this conversation now, because if you're serious about applying for it, like, the sooner you get started and get the wheels in motion, the better off you're going to be, and you won't be scrambling on it. So that's the that's the buyer beware piece of this. Let me put the positive side on it. I would argue to you that it'd be worth the effort, because it's going to be valuable to you independent of the outcome, right? So I don't measure success in applying for these scholarships based on interviews we would garner or scholarship wins. I would measure it on the personal growth that an individual experiences by going through the scholarship process. So the scholarship process really is going to force you to think more broadly and deeply about yourself, about the way that you're uniquely gifted and talented, and the world around you, and how you think about how those gifts and talents and passions can be fueled and focused towards making a difference in the world. And that's what these scholarships really force you to do through the application process, and the work with KDK and myself is what we're going to push you to do. So that has, I think you could agree, intrinsic value in itself, because it's almost like a life skill to be able to do some of that and do that work. It's also readily transferable if you decide you're going to apply to a domestic graduate school. Like, a lot of the work that you would do on one of these applications will translate into, and it's pretty routine for people. I wouldn't say put all your eggs in the UK scholarship basket. Like, it makes sense simultaneously your senior year, if you think you want to go to graduate education the fall after your senior year, or the year after, or something like that, you apply for domestic programs at the same time, more or less, and then see how things sort out. And then the last one gets back to that earlier point, like, having skills that you're going to hone and refine. I think there's great value in doing things outside of the classroom that aren't for a grade, that force you to think deeply about yourself, and whether it's analysis, creativity, communication, all those kind of things. The scholarship process and the application process forces you to do that in a healthy way. It's a maturing process that you go through. Okay, so what are they looking for? And this is a broad brush, but holds true for basically all of these scholarships. So they want a track record of academic excellence. So the general rule of thumb is 3.7 or higher. The vast majority of the people who are going to win Rhodes and Marshalls and Gates scholarships next fall will have 3.9 or higher. So it's competitive when it comes to GPA. They're looking for intellectual curiosity, and so a couple thoughts on what that means. One is you've thought deeply about your intended profession, what you want to do with all this education that you're amassing. So you need to have curiosity about that field, and you need to be able to hold your own in a conversation with somebody who has deep expertise in that field. So there would be an expectation that if you decide you want to look at education reform in the United States, that you would be able to engage with an expert on that subject because you've been intellectually curious enough about that subject to be really understand it. So that's the depth piece of the intellectual curiosity. There's also a breadth piece to intellectual curiosity, and that will come across in your application, either through the personal statement or some other pieces of the application, some extent your resume, where you're not a one-dimensional person. Like all you focused on is, water conservation in the southwest of the United States, and that's all you're about. The scholarship committees don't like one-dimensional people who can't show a broader intellectual curiosity. The other piece that I would say of the curiosity is an engagement with the world around you. So if one of you are selected for an interview, the panel is going to be curious about you because you go to a school that's in the city limits of Detroit, and they're going to expect that you have a good understanding of what's going on in Detroit public policy and that kind of thing. They'll expect you have an understanding of a degree of what's going on in the state of Michigan, and they'll also have, just keep on doing, Detroit, Michigan, United States, you've got a good handle on that, you're thinking globally. The rule of thumb I'd use with my students in Annapolis was anything that was on the front page of the New York Times would basically be fair game to have a substantive conversation with someone who's going to be competitive for one of these scholarships. Like that's the kind of intellectual curiosity that the scholarship committees are looking for. And that's not to mean that you're going to be an expert on stuff that's on there, but you'd be able to have a conversation about it because you've thought more broadly than the specific major and discipline that you're a part of. Leadership. So they want to see a demonstrated track record of leadership of organizations you've been a part of and weren't just a participant, but that you were out front and making an impact and an influence on. So there needs to be some sort of demonstration of that, either in your personal statement or in your resume. And then they want to see kind of a leadership vision, how you're going to take your leadership skills and apply it to a problem you want to solve in the world or issues that you want to dedicate your career towards. So that's the leadership component that's kind of baked into the application. Compassion. So they're looking for people who are able to demonstrate empathy and an awareness of injustice, inequality, and that can be, right here on your doorstep, or it could be something more national or global. But showing a demonstrated understanding and compassion towards your fellow human beings is something they really value. And I've been hitting on this one, but it's the vision. And this is the challenge of it, that you're able to communicate a real vision of who you are and where you're going, and how this specific scholarship is going to enable you to reach that vision or to live out that vision. Okay, does that make sense? I mean, look, simple stuff. It's no big deal. No, it's like this is heavy stuff, right? Like these are not easy pieces to necessarily put together. Let me quickly run through each of the scholarships because each one's sort of unique. So the Rhodes is at Oxford. It's a picture of Rhodes House. It has its own building there at Oxford. There's 32 awarded annually in the United States, and then I think globally there's probably like 80 or 90. So think about the British Commonwealth, and basically like there's Canadian Rhodes, there's South African Rhodes, there's Australian Rhodes. Anyways, so it's across the Commonwealth and even the rebels here in the United States. All fields, so it's not restricted by field. This is a pretty broad, it takes a lot of different interests and puts them together. We can talk more about specific disciplines if you want. One thing I always sort of flag for people on the Rhodes application that makes it different than the other ones is that they ask for up to 8 letters of recommendation. And depending, I don't know how, if that strikes you like, oh, I've got 15 people who would write about me tomorrow, no big deal. That wasn't me when I was in your shoes. I was like, 8 people? I don't know if I know 8 people could write a paragraph about me. So that can be a little intimidating to think about that. It can be a broad cross-section, but I'll say of the candidates that I worked with at the Naval Academy who won the Rhodes Scholarship, I think one had 6, the others had 7 or 8. Because they're really looking, this is a little bit on that thread about intellectual curiosity. Like, the letter writers are able to round out yourself, right? Like, my crew coach at the Naval Academy, who I'm not sure if he could write in paragraphs, wrote me a letter of recommendation for the Rhodes Scholarship, right? Like, because I wanted to show sort of that component of sort of who I was. I think somebody affiliated with the chapel at the Naval Academy who I had a relationship wrote a letter. So think more broadly than just professors, right? You'll want 4 or 5 of those to be really quality academic letters speaking to your academic and sort of career interest stuff, but then you can round it out with 2 or 3 others. I think KDK will send out the brief. I'm not going to show you YouTube. You can watch YouTube on your own and watch the Rhodes video there. Okay. Marshall Scholarship. So the Marshall Scholarship is 1 to 3 years. Typically it's 2, but they've come out with this new thing where you can apply for a 1-year Marshall, because they do 1-year master's degrees in the UK, which is a possibility, especially if you want to do a professional type of terminal degree after that. The 1-year master's is appealing, or if you go to law school or get an MBA or medical school, the 1-year master's can be appealing. So there's 40 plus or at least 40 recently. I think they did like 44 this last year. It's U.S. only. It's named after General George C. Marshall, as in the Marshall Plan for Europe was enacted by Parliament in the UK as an act of gratitude for the United States work post-World War II. And so I think it's been around for about 60 years now. And the thing about the Marshall is you can go to any UK university. So anywhere, England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland is fair game for it. And if you do apply, there's some nuance about, like, you can't just say Oxford's my first choice, Cambridge is my second choice, if that makes sense. Does that make sense at all? Like, they want you to see that you're interested in going to UK schools that are different than the equivalent of Harvard and Yale. So you've got to kind of do some research and figure out what the University of Leeds is doing, or Exeter, or, you know, and we'll work through that. That there's some, yeah. Anyways, it's more challenging in terms of aperture of programs and schools than the Rhodes. The Rhodes is like you're just looking at Oxford. That's all you got to do. The Marshall's it's broader. You have a question on that?
Yeah. Could you actually transfer the school that you're at during your stay?
Yeah, it's very common to do like 1 year at one and 1 or 2 at another.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say when I did it, 30%, 25 to 30% of the people, probably, switched after the first year to another one. Yeah, so that's a possibility too. Yep, good question. Okay, it's Marshall. Gates is at Cambridge. In part of the Gates application, you actually do a University of Cambridge application for the Gates, including some other things on top of that. But again, similar in size to the Rhodes and the Marshall, about 40 a year. The Gates is also international. I think they're doing 90 a year, and I forget how the Gates Foundation selects the other countries, but it's an international cohort, like the Rhodes is an international cohort. They take all fields. They have a bias towards STEM, or more research, PhD related fields. It's the Gates Foundation, and it's sort of in the DNA. They're more technically focused. The running joke on these, these have become kind of the big 3 scholarships: the Rhodes, the Marshall, and the Gates, right? So the Rhodes, the joke is they're all going to be politicians. The Marshall, the joke is they're all going to be PhD academics. And then the Gates is, they're all going to be, technical lab physicists and that kind of stuff. That's too broad of a brush to paint for the scholarships because the Gates will pick a politician, and the Rhodes will pick the next great academic in whatever field and that kind of thing. There's enough overlap between them, but those are kind of the stereotypes behind it. Again, Cambridge, 2-3 years. It's a great opportunity. Okay, so this one's a little more unique, and it's newer. It's been around 12, maybe it's a year or two younger than the Gates, so maybe 15 years or something. But it's 1 year to Ireland or Northern Ireland. It's funded by a foundation associated with the Irish government. Grateful for, at the time, Senator Mitchell's work in the peace process in Ireland. So it's kind of like the Marshall in that regard. There's just 12 awarded, and any field can apply for it. So I had 2 students who did that out of the Naval Academy and had a fantastic experience. Really, really enjoyed it. Ireland's not a bad place to be for either. Okay, Churchill, now we're getting a little bit narrower. So this is a scholarship specific to Churchill College, Cambridge. Maybe a quick word on Oxford and Cambridge universities. They operate off from, even more so than Wayne State, a college system. And so the colleges are these own little entities themselves, of both undergrads and graduates for the most part. You can have grad-only colleges as well, but this is to a specific college at Cambridge. 15 awarded in the U.S., and this is probably the most this is hardcore science, math and engineering. So if you don't think you're going to get a PhD in the hard sciences, probably don't apply for Churchill. Yeah, we can come back to that. People have specific questions. So I include Rotary in here because this can be kind of like an unknown gem to people, depending on what your home of record is for Rotary Club. That Rotary Club may have a scholarship available that you could apply for, and theoretically you could take it almost anywhere in the world. I've had a number of students who were able to win this international scholarship and take it to Oxford or Cambridge. So it's just another funding vehicle to do graduate education that should be on your radar screen, and you should look whatever your local Rotary Club is and get in contact with whoever in that club is responsible for the scholarships piece and see if they're going to be awarding a scholarship next year. So, yeah. Do you want to take the full
Yeah,
breaks?
well, actually, why don't we, because these are all more similar, I think, with the exception of the Rotary. So why don't we do some questions on these, and then I'll talk about the Fulbright.
Okay.
Because when we start to talk about Rotary and Fulbright, we're in a slightly different realm. They're great, but they're just different.
Yeah, it's true. Maybe it's good to do the pause. Yeah.
So any questions about these? And why don't you just tell us your names so everybody knows everybody's name.
I was a little bit late. I'm Hira. I'm a junior, and I was just interested, so I came. So for these scholarships, are we supposed to choose which one is a best fit for us, or are we working with you guys to decide which one's best for us?
The latter. Certainly you can shape based on your own preferences and what might appeal to you, what you think you're interested in, but it'll be kind of a dialogue. So what we'll do from here, and this is, I can give a little more in terms of process forward, we'll send out kind of a framework application for you to fill out that asks generally the broad questions you're going to be asked in the scholarship application. And once we see your responses to that, it'll become clear to us how to coach you along the way. Theoretically, you could have somebody who would apply to all of these. In fact, a lot of times for Rhodes, Marshall, and Gates, those three, it's worth, if you're going to apply for one, probably to apply for all three. Depending on what happens, what we have to do on our side, there's something called an institutional endorsement. And Wayne State, as a university, has to be wise about its institutional endorsements on these scholarships. And so there might be a case, depending on how an application is developing and that kind of thing, where we'll allocate institutional endorsements in a way that makes the most sense across the board, if that makes sense. So somebody who would make sense for all 3 scholarships apply, we might endorse for all 3. Someone who we feel like is more tracked for some reason, they have this. There's someone at Cambridge doing work that they've already researched for some reason in undergrad, and there's a connection there and that kind of thing. Like, oh, okay, we're going to institutionally endorse this person for a Gates, but it doesn't. The Oxford piece just isn't that compelling for a Rhodes or something. Yeah.
Does that? I mean, what's your worry or what's the underlying concern?
I mean, he answered my question.
Okay, got it. Okay, good.
Okay.
Other questions?
I'm sort of curious about GPA requirements. Exactly that. How I assume they're pretty serious about that, but
So, I think that they have backed off how rigorously they sort of apply the GPA standard. That being said, if you're coming in sub 3.7, there has to be aspects of your application that are really compelling.
is that where the recommendation letters sort of?
Yeah, recommendation letters are a part of that.
Okay.
Personal narrative is a part of that. Yeah, so that's the challenge.
Sure. So it's definitely still worth looking into, even if.
It's worth looking into, and like once Kay and I can see your initial application, we'll actually have initial sense like, okay, and we can advise you, say, hey, you're an amazing student, you're going to do great things in life. It's not worth you spending 50 or 75 hours to try to get a competitive application aligned for it, just because it's a bridge too far. I mean, we'll be honest with you. Yeah, in my experience, students who had a little lower GPA were either like all-American athletes in varsity sports or like junior Olympian kind of level people.
Obviously.
Yeah, I know, that's you.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
In 3 different sports, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
4 actually.
Okay, got it.
Or they have done something on the humanitarian side that like would make you cry, essentially, when you read it. And I'm not trying to be melodramatic, but it was like,
I saved a bird once.
yeah, I think you're there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Did it live?
Yeah,
It lived. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But
Barrow.
the other thing is that the Fulbright is not nearly as
Yeah.
grade focused.
Okay.
And so we can talk about that in a minute. So not all hope is lost, and the same with Rotary. Like,
Rotary's not that.
yeah, Rotary. It just depends on where you're from and where your community is and what they're looking to do. Yeah, I mean, these things they're kind of snooty, and they can afford to be. So whatever, that's their issue.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So with the institutional affiliation, I graduate mid-August here. If I'm applying that fall, would I still get institutional?
Well, are you going to be affiliated with another higher education institution?
No.
Then you need it from Wayne State.
Okay.
Like you as an individual can't apply for the Rhodes
Right, yeah.
or really any of these scholarships without having a higher ed institution endorse
Right.
you.
Mhm.
So if you're going to law school or you're going to get a master's degree, in that case you can choose between whether you want your graduate institution or your undergrad institution to endorse you. Generally it's better for an undergraduate institution to do it because your graduate institution will not know you at all.
Sure.
But in your case, it'll need to be Wayne.
And Wayne will take the time and effort to do it. So it's a good thing. And we've been doing Tim, we've been doing a great job, like getting the letters out and getting really high quality letters. So it works that way. Any other questions or any other thoughts? What we're going to be looking for, we've sort of set up a process here. What we're going to be looking for is to have you get in touch with us pretty soon that you're interested in. We'll send out to everybody we've done a Qualtrics online form, and you can get a sense. It sort of leads you through the questions and asks you to upload some stuff. We're going to get a sense out there if people are actually interested in applying, and if they are, then we'll go further. The Rhodes and the basically all of the UK scholarships are pretty early, so we're going to really want to work with you, especially say starting in August or so. So we're going to want something from you so that we know whether that's going to work. So I think what we talked I think Was
Yeah, I
it?
can go to that.
Was
I
there-
think we're looking for something in a month around that preliminary stuff.
Right,
Yeah, May 14th. So just over a month.
right,
to
so
put-
what we've done is, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, so we've given you time to like get exams done, get your life in order, and this doesn't have to be perfect. We just need to know if there's the raw material there to make it, to make it worthwhile. And that's kind of a mutual fit, like if we've got a limited number of applicants, is it worth us and worth it for you to sort of spend the time on going to that next level?
Yeah.
We'll give you some time. You'll give us basically a couple of essays that you'll upload. They don't have to be perfect. Again, we just need to know that you're at that stage and that you're in all of the ballpark sort of categories for what we're looking for. So I know Nathan and I have talked about this, so it's kind of that preliminary kind of, is this a mutual fit kind of thing. But once that's done, then we've got the summer to work on it. You'll have the summer to gather those letters of recommendation, the summer to put together your personal statement. So we're available to work on that over the summer with you. And then when before we return in August, then we'll sort of suss out who's ready to go to that next level, and we will do a kind of full court press to get the application ready and done, because it's mid-October that it's got to be done. So that first semester of the term, first semester of, for you it'll be life, but that period is going to be the really kind of the intense period. So there'll be a short intense period after graduation. We've got to get something in summer where we can work through it and talk about it, and then that intense period of kind of final application and sending off that'll begin in August. Any questions on that? Let me talk really quickly about the Fulbright, and just ask if any of you have spent any significant time abroad in other places. Have any of you been?
Just for a month.
So where were you for a month?
Italy.
Italy? Did you learn? Do you have Italian?
Un po', sì.
Oh, okay, good. How good is your Italian?
It's decent.
Okay, could you work in an office or something like that with your Italian?
I could. I think I could get by for a while. And
Okay.
Then I realized I was faking it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's always faking it,
Right,
right?
of course.
You're always you're always faking it through. So, but that's actually a good thing. What about Nathan? What about you? Any foreign languages? Okay. Here?
I speak Urdu.
Okay.
I never worked in Pakistan professionally or
Okay.
anything like that. I just have family there. And then I'm doing a 6-week program in China this summer.
Great, to learn Chinese?
I have no
Yeah, I
idea.
mean, dude, now you're not going to get a lot of Chinese in 6 weeks, but some maybe.
Maybe if I worked at it, if that was a goal.
Got it. And what about for you?
I also speak Urdu. I've taken Spanish, but that's
Not like you're not going to live in Spain. So you guys both have Urdu. Is your family from Pakistan as well? Do you go back a lot?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So the Fulbright is a 1-year scholarship that was created in honor. Well, actually, it was created by William Fulbright, who was a senator from Arkansas. Actually, a mentor of Bill Clinton when Clinton was much younger, and it was designed to encourage Americans to travel abroad and see the world, and to learn from that world. So what the Fulbright will do is fund 1 year of work, of research or teaching abroad, and they have 2 different flavors, 2 different branches. One is a teaching English fellowship, so you would actually go to another country. In those cases, you usually don't have to have the language of the country, but you need to be able to show that you are a good enough teacher to teach English, and so have at least some training or some experience as a teacher. Although they're not super hard and firm on that, but they like to see some that you've put in an effort to sort of learn how to teach English. The other ones, these are the ones that I have more familiarity with, are research-based ones. So in these scholarships, they actually fund recent undergrads. So you apply as a senior year or the year after your senior year to go abroad to a particular country to do some kind of research-based work related to something that you're interested in or good at. So what they're looking for is someone who has a really interesting research question, who can go to another country and who can actually achieve that research goal with the basis that they've already got. They give out hundreds of awards, but the awards are in different numbers depending on the country, and so each country has a specific number of awards. There are a lot of awards to the bigger European countries, places where people want to go, but they are also hyper competitive. Those are really hard to get, almost at the Rhodes Marshall level. So if you want to go to the UK or, especially a lot of people want to go to the UK because they don't have to learn a new language, but even, places that are scenic, people want to go. So France, Italy to a certain, Italy, I think, people want to go to cool places, right? Cool places, at least places they think are cool. What they don't realize is there are a lot of places that are very cool that they don't know, and those places get a lot fewer applications. I work on the country of Slovakia, and Slovakia actually had fewer applicants than there were places last year in the research category. So one of the things that we're trying to do is figure out how we can get students abroad to places like Slovakia and Romania and other places where people don't necessarily think about going. It will do almost any discipline as long as you're willing to do some kind of academic-like research in the area. And so in the process, and I've spent the last 3 years on the panel for Eastern Europe, so we've seen everything from astronomy to professional beekeeping to really hardcore sciences to business and social sciences. So it's kind of across the board, as long as you can make a plausible claim that you're going to be doing some kind of research that's going to make the world a better, more interesting place. You can hit the next one. So here's what they're looking for in the Fulbright. The Fulbright scholarship proposal is a little bit less intense than the one that we've seen with these other senior level scholarships, but it is like the Truman in that you have to provide a specific proposal. So in this case, the specific proposal is not just what school you're going to go to and what you want to do with the world, but in this case, it's I want to go to a specific country to do a specific thing. So toward that end, what you propose actually has to be usable or doable. Like you actually have to be able to draw out a specific schedule of what you want to research, what question you're asking, what methods you're going to use to answer that question, how long it's going to take, how you're going to disseminate your findings, and so on. So you're trying to do a specific project to learn a specific thing. And it's got to be something that people care about, at least in some ways. Even if it's only academics who care about it, it's got to be something that it has some kind of broader relevance. The second question they're going to look at, and this is actually drawn directly from our forms for how we're ranking people, the categories we're ranking people, suitability for you. So are you the person who can do that? So you've proposed this research thing. Are you a good fit for that? And what that means is, first of all, is there any evidence that you can successfully travel abroad? Is there any evidence that you can go? Now, there's a kind of intermediate kind of Goldilocks zone here. Fulbright will fund people who've never been abroad, but almost no one we get who applies has never been anywhere. Like usually it's people who've shown that they're able to travel, that they're successfully able to go abroad. And then on the other end, they don't want people who basically live in country. And we occasionally get these people, who are, who spend every summer all summer with their grandparents, who've lived there for long periods of time, who've only sort of recently kind of become citizens, but are really clearly have their home space in that country. What they're really looking for, what their ideal is, and it actually fits the Wayne student really, really well, they are looking for people with maybe ties to a specific other country, but for whom the Fulbright is an opportunity for them to build relationships with that country as adult scholars and not as the children or grandchildren of families that live there. So the idea is you're going back you're going back as a scholar of the place. You're not going back to just be with family and sort of do the stuff that you've already done before. And then the question is, would you make a good ambassador? And that's actually one of the questions that they ask. Like, would you make a good kind of representative of the United States abroad? So the letters really are kind of things that sort of, talk about that and talk about whether you would be a good fit. In the process, they're also going to be asking you things like, what are you going to do there to engage with the community? So there is part of the application that says, what kinds of service activities you're going to do. And people say they're going to work with local nonprofits, or they're going to, volunteer at a sports club, or depending on their own interests, they can work on that. And then the final thing is, does this fit in with your arc? So like the Truman and like the Rhodes and Cambridge, with maybe a little bit less specificity, they expect to see some kind of narrative arc of who you are and who you want to be, and how this fits into that. So, for the beekeeping example that I mentioned, that seems like a really weird thing. But the woman who applied was able to persuade us that, she had become passionate about beekeeping in her senior year of high school, and she wanted to grow up to be somebody who was studying the decline of bee colonies, and so she wanted to be sort of in apiology, which is study bees, and so that this is a perfect part of her career trajectory for what she wants to do. If she wanted to go off and become a pediatric anesthesiologist as great as the proposal is, it wouldn't have been very much, it wouldn't have been easily considered because it's not part of this. So this isn't meant as a kind of deviation from or distraction from or a kind of find yourself trip abroad. It's meant as something that's integrally part of who you want to do and what you want to do next. A lot of Fulbrights then go on to apply for Rhodes and Marshalls and other things with kind of this under their belt. In that 1 year while they're away, many of them are applying for these other kinds of scholarships. So it needs to fit into your broader plans. You have one statement of proposal, couple-page statement of proposal of your research, and then about a 1.5 page personal statement, and that's where you sort of tell the story of you and how this fits into the story of you. One more slide. So yeah, like I said, the statement consists of a proposal, a personal statement, letters of recommendation, 3 letters of recommendation. Usually those are from academics, though, as Tim said, for some of the others, it's okay to go sort of off the board for one of them, to have it be someone in your life or someone who knows you well enough to know why this is going to be good or important for you. And then the better ones have letters of invitation. And what this means is if you're going to go to a particular country, it's really important for you to start building connections with that place beforehand, because you want to be able to say, I want to study at this laboratory in this city, and I actually want to be able to do my research with Scholar X or in the laboratory of Scholar Y. And so what you have now for this summer is time to actually start doing that. If you've been abroad, say if you were going to Pakistan and you wanted to, and if you were going this summer, you would have the chance, or now for you actually, since you can't do it till you're a senior, you could actually start building those connections now, so that if you want to go as a senior in a couple of years, you'll know those professors who are going to do that, and they'll be able to say, I really, Hera's been here, she's visited our lab, I really want to, I really endorse her ability, and if she comes, we'll provide her with office space and access to our labs and the ability to participate in all of the work of what we do. So that's the kind of thing you really want to see that. We don't run this process, so this isn't us, but we'll help you work through it, especially I will help you work through on this one. Wayne has its own process that's run through the Office for Foreign Students in Manoogian, but part of our job is what we can do is to help you get through that. They've got their own internal screening process, and as with the other scholarships, there is a university requirement to be endorsed by a university, but in this case, Honors doesn't run that process. So the Office of Foreign Students runs that process, but we can help you work through that. So that's about it on the Fulbright. Any questions about that or any of the others? We've overloaded you. Your brains are dead. Anything you can think of?
Well, so basically we should start thinking about who we are and
Yes.
things, so we can apply by May 14th. That's basically, and then from there you guys decide.
We designed the May 14 application for just to see where you're at on those sort of questions. So there'll be a personal statement in there. We'll want to hear about your research interests for graduate school. It's trying to pull out leadership aspects. So yeah, we'll if you spend 10 to 20 hours with that application, I think we'll know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not. We're not looking for something super polished. We're looking to see, are you in the ballpark, so that we can say, basically, this is a kind of screening process, largely for you all, to say, this is great. You'd be great for this or for that, but maybe not for these others. Or maybe this just, this isn't a good time, or this doesn't look like this is way. Or if you really want to do this, here's what you'd need. So what this allows us to do is a kind of summer, sort of spring diagnostic to say, given what you've told us, if you really want to have a chance of winning for this is what you're going to need to do.
Okay. And I wasn't sure if I should ask this now, but it's more of a specific question. I don't know if it applies.
But tell us and we can tell you.
But so I'm graduating a summer and a semester late. So am I just excluded? I shouldn't apply at all, or is there?
When are you going to graduate?
So I'll probably graduate fall 2020. Yeah.
2020.
Like
Instead of May 2020.
Right.
You've got to be able to take up the scholarship.
Yeah. So you would want to wait a year.
So okay, I wouldn't be.
You could apply for Truman.
Right. So the Truman you didn't come for, but we can talk a little bit about the Truman. But the Truman you would qualify as a rising junior still, and the Truman is for public service. And so if you can think of if you have goals in kind of broadly public service, I think we've talked about this, you do kind of, you might be actually still a good applicant for that.
Okay.
So.
But like I could still apply for the roads if I waited? Or-
Yes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely. No, and you know, the time of graduation or the length, they're not looking at that,
Okay.
right? They're not looking at how long you're spending in school, they're not looking, I mean, they're looking at your academic performance while you're here. But an early graduation or late graduation, I don't think is a huge deal unless it's because you've gotten a lot of Fs or something,
No.
which isn't you. So yeah, we're good on that.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other thoughts or questions? So yeah, so here's our process. You'll get first thing first, get your exams done, live your life. Once those exams are done, because you know we don't want to screw up your exam schedule, so then you're not eligible because your grades suck. So get your exams done, do well, and then as soon as you're done, turn your attention to this. Like take one day off, and then come back and say, okay, I want to apply for this. Start to think about what that would look like in terms of what those applications are. I'm going to send out a form with the application link, and so you can take a look at it. If you have any questions about that or any thoughts about that, let us know. We will, as it says, we'll look at the lists this summer. We'll get back to you and say, yes, no, maybe, and then in August we'll get back to you on these to help it go further.
So what's the track record for Wayne State? Do we have anybody in the previous year?
We have not really taken. So we've only been doing this now for 2 years. We have not had any winners yet. But they consistently tell us that we are the kinds of people, this is the kind of school that they really, I mean, the head of the Truman Foundation came out here because he wanted to talk to our students.
Is that the city aspect of it?
Sorry?
Or is it the city aspect?
No, it's kind of academic diversity. Like the guy who ran Truman said they are literally tired of getting Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Harvard applications, and they want people from other schools. It broadens their pool. It makes their graduating class look less white and male, so we are exactly, not that they won't take white and male, but they want the kinds of schools that, and it makes them look like they're fulfilling their, Harry Truman never even went to college, so for this scholarship to be concentrated among the elite schools, especially given what we now know about how you get into elite schools, I think there's a real emphasis on getting schools like us. So, well, I think we've gotten closer each, both years. We certainly put together better application processes both of those years. These are 1 in 50 chances. So the fact that we've sent 6 applicants off and we haven't gotten one yet, if we send 50 off and don't get one, then I'll tell you.
I think they're more like 1 in 500.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty.
Out of 0. I mean, the scholarships themselves are they're a real long shot. Like if it was just about winning the scholarship, I would tell you not to mess with this. But the like I was saying at the beginning, philosophically, the process you're going to go through itself is valuable in its own right.
Everyone comes out of this knowing more about themselves and what they want to do than they would have otherwise. And honestly, this is the point at which you need to be thinking about that. I don't want to sound like you need to, but this is the point at which it really pays to be thinking about it, and which almost nobody ever does, because they're in some kind of path. And one of the things we've seen as we've gone through this process is people actually reconsidering what it is they want to do and where they want to, we'll ask questions like, do you really want to go to law school? Why do you want to go to law school? Well, I want to be a politician. Well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to change policy. Well, why don't you go to a policy school? Oxford has policy schools. And then they start to think along different tracks. And so we'll challenge you a little bit about whether, because sometimes we hear stuff, your plans for you don't correspond actually to what you want to accomplish. And so part of our job in that process is actually to kind of play that role of maybe this isn't, maybe what you think you want or what you've been told you have to do with your life by your parents isn't what you want to do with your life. So that's kind of our job. Let friends know about this. I know a lot of people signed up and they couldn't come. But any of your friends, any of the people you work with, really encourage them to do this. The more people we get to apply, I know it seems a little bit like, well, if more people apply, they're competitors. But frankly, we want a cohort of people to do this, and a big chunk of what we did last year, the 3 Truman nominees we had, really helped one another.
Absolutely.
We would sit together, but then they would go off and they would work on each other's applicants. So we really want multiple folks to be able to do this, because there's stuff that you can give to one another that we can't always supply. So yeah, so encourage others. And thanks. Appreciate it. We'll get this out to you.
Thanks.